Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by the AC Airport. Plan your summer vacation now. Spirit Airlines is offering nonstop flights from Atlantic City International Airport to Boston, Atlanta, San Juan, Miami, and other exciting destinations. Visit spirit.com. The Inside the Birds podcast, Adam Kaplan and this man. He's Geoff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast, and he joins me on this Monday edition of Football at 4. And, you know, we just were talking about how the NBA draft is 10 days away. 10 days away to the NBA draft. We have training camp for the Eagles beginning in less than 2 months now. Excuse me, less than a month, about a month and 2 weeks here. So we're getting close to training camp for the Eagles, but we got plenty of stuff to discuss on today's edition of Football at 4. What's going on, Moshe?
What's that expression, so close yet so far away?
Right there.
It does feel like training camp, this is the next thing in line for the NFL calendar, but yet it is 6 weeks away, and I certainly am not trying to rush those 6 weeks, but I do look forward to another season.
I am too. I'm looking forward to the summer. You know, it's summer's like here. I got some things planned, and then as soon as I get back, I'm ready for the season. We're all excited for it. I do want to get your opinion on something. I know everybody, this is the list time of year. Pro Football Focus ranked the offensive line. They had Philadelphia number 1 overall. What do you think about that?
Doesn't really surprise me.
No, all right. So there's your answer was you're not, and I can see your face. You're not surprised at all. You're not like, oh, that's something. They had them ranked as the number 1 offensive line in all of football.
Yeah, and you know, rankings are artificial. It doesn't mean they're the best, but it shows the talent that I think we all know the Eagles have. They have an all-pro center. They have a second-round pick left guard who played really well last year as a rookie, Landon Dickerson. Jordan Mailata, we've seen, a 7th-round pick who's become a starting left tackle. Still a little bit to prove in pass pro from his standpoint, but as a run blocker, when you have Dickerson and Mailata on the left side, as you saw last year, you're going to punish some teams. And then, of course, you have a Pro Bowl at right tackle with Lane Johnson. And at right guard, we'll see. We've got a little battle brewing here between Isaac Seumalo, who is he's above average offensive lineman, and then Jack Driscoll, who's played well at that spot. But, you know, all told, you have at least 2 Pro Bowlers at center and right tackle, and then you have a left guard and left tackle who people feel both have Pro Bowl potential, or at least, you know, better than average potential. So that's good. This is a league where you look at a lot of offensive lines and you think, my gosh, 5 guys out there and not one single can block. You know, I mean, there are a lot of teams that struggle in that department.
No, you're definitely right about that. And one of the comments that they made was that there is not a single below-average starter along the Eagles' offensive line. You don't find that along many offensive lines.
That's a good point. Now, I think you could make an argument for Kansas City and Cleveland, and New England's got a good one. Baltimore, again, like when you're comparing 5 to 5 to 5 to 5, I don't know what tips the scales, right? But the Eagles are obviously up there. I mean, they had to rely on their offensive line last year to set the tone for their offense, and they did, and they were able to.
Cleveland was ranked number 2, so you threw them in there. Detroit is actually number 3.
That's a sneaky good one. I've seen that, and I forgot that they've really addressed that line a lot with some guys. So it'll be interesting to see. That'll be, first game of the year.
By the way, our old friend Big V is the starting right guard for the Detroit Lions. Tampa Bay was number 4. Green Bay was number 5. Dallas was number 6. New England was number 7. Cincinnati, who was dreadful on the line last year and made the Super Bowl, now they have a top 10 offensive line. Kansas City, as you mentioned, they're number 9, and number 10 was Indianapolis. So there's your top 10 offensive lines according to Pro Football Focus.
Sure. It feels like Kansas City. I mean, for what they did last year, Creed Humphrey wound up becoming one of the best centers in the league. Their right guard, who was the rookie from I can't remember his name at this point, but he played really well. Trey Smith, was it? He played well. Yeah, they had good play out of their tackles. I think that's a pretty good offensive line.
Now, the other one, you know, Pro Football Focus did the coaches, and I was surprised to see Nick Sirianni, number 14 on the list, Doug Peterson, number 15, and Sean McDermott, number 16.
Wow, that's a little bit of a surprise. That's basically PFF saying and this is not going to be good for Eagles fans, that Brian Dable was the straw that made that drink there in Buffalo and not Sean McDermott. I don't know if I agree with that, because I would say Buffalo's been pretty good compared to what Buffalo was before Sean McDermott for about 20 years to what they've been with Sean McDermott there. Yeah. I think you have to give Sean McDermott some credit.
Now, that being said, if you saw those Pro Football Focus coaching ratings over, I think they came out on Friday, there was a lot of discussion about how people disagreed with them pretty heavily.
Yeah, well, they're just like everybody else. It's just an opinion.
Absolutely. Good fodder, good fun, off-season stuff. All right, let's get into a couple of other conversational pieces here. Right now, as we mentioned, you're about a month and a half away from the start of training camp, July 26th. Where do you look at this team right now compared to where we were in the summer at this time last year?
Yeah, I know this is something we talked about on the Inside the Birds that dropped today. Adam and I have both done some homework and talked to some people, involved with the team, around the team. And there's definitely, from the team, a sense of I'd say, accomplishment as far as making sure that this roster was ready to compete, like really compete this year, as opposed to this time last year when they knew they were going into the season or coming out of the OTAs with some glaring holes and that they would have to compensate for. But, since the end of this past year, they've added an impact cornerback in James Bradbury, an impact wide receiver in A.J. Brown. They've upgraded their linebacker group. Again, I don't know if you call whether it's Nakobe Dean or Kaiser White the kind of impact player that A.J. Brown is, but they've raised the level of talent in that classroom, that room for linebackers. Probably, we'll see if it can match the 2017 team. That was a pretty good group of linebackers there, but certainly in the last 3 or 4 years, this should be a better group. They really haven't regressed, I don't think, in any area. They've only added. So defensive line, of course, they've brought some guys back and then made some draft picks there too. So this team, the Eagles feel that they can put out a team this year that should be more competitive when they play those good teams. We saw Jekyll and Hyde last year. We saw them beat really bad teams. We saw them embarrassed against good teams. That shouldn't be the case this year. They should be much more competitive against the good teams.
Well,
being the operative word.
Yeah, well, it should. And to make that jump, it's Jalen Hurts. So I guess now that the OTAs are in the book, you saw them. We're in the summer now, so we're not going to see him for a while. But where do we think his development is?
Yeah, some of the feedback that we reported on Inside the Birds is that because you can't really put much into these OTAs, they barely do anything, even more so than last year. But they'll do some 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s, but not as much. But as far as his comfort within the offense, knowing where the ball should go based on the coverage that he sees, knowing that the ball's got to come out, the timing with his receivers, understanding where the principle of the play, where the strength of the play call is, he's been much better at this time, as you would hope he would be, second year full starting in this offense. But they've seen that development. The mechanics, Nick Sirianni has even mentioned, are better. They're tighter. Now, to me, I don't think you really can gauge the overall improvement from a physical and mechanical standpoint until you're in a simulated where there's a pass rush, because that's when even really good quarterbacks sometimes abandon those mechanics, and we've seen that from him in the past. But certainly good to see this year that he's worked on those areas that he needed to.
I feel like one guy who's been under the radar so much this offseason is the running back, Miles Sanders, because, Moshe, you got A.J. Brown. What's going to happen with the other wide receivers now that Brown is here? The defense has almost been completely overhauled. But Miles Sanders now is entering a pretty big year. So where do we think he is, and how has he looked?
Yeah, it's funny. At the OTA last week, Adam made a comment to me. He said, man, Miles Sanders, maybe it's just me, but he looks bigger in the lower body, like his legs, his calves, look bigger. Then he went and looked into it, and sure enough, it's true that he's added some muscle there. And for him, that's huge because he's been mostly affected by lower leg injuries going back to his rookie year and missing the camps, the first camps with hamstring issues. Last year, I think he had an ankle, right? It was an ankle problem that kept aggravating, and then, the hand, that's just football and contact. But a lot of his issues have been lower body related. So if he was able to put some pounds on there, add some strength, to that area and he's not as vulnerable when he touches the ball. It would be really nice to see for Miles Sanders and for the team if he developed into that reliable back who could carry the ball 20 to 25 times a game if need be. Because right now they don't have a power back. They don't have that Jordan Howard style of runner. They have Miles Sanders. They have Kenneth Gainwell. Kennedy Brooks was a rookie free agent who's powerful, but he's not guaranteed to make the team. And Boston Scott runs with some power because he's built, he's very, very compactly built and strong. But really, we know that last year's run game had that downhill Jordan Howard element that was so important. And they don't have that right now. And part of me thinks that they don't have it because they don't really feel the need to have it until they need it. I mean, Jordan Howard the Eagles are the only team that has shown interest in him over the last 2 years, ever since he's been cut loose by Miami. Remember, he said he was going to retire, and the Eagles are the only team that gave him a call. Then they cut him. Then they re-signed him. Then they let him dangle out here in free agency for as long as they have. I think that they know that they can just pick up the phone and call him up 5 days before the season if need be.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. A couple of summertime thoughts here. You got coming into training camp, you're going to wonder, you got Dallas Goedert. We imagine he'll be a big part of the offense, but who else at that position?
Ever since that Tyree Jackson injury last year, and I'm not saying Tyree would have been the number 2 going into this year, but we loved to see the development of this kid, right? A 6'7" tight end who used to play quarterback, and then, of course, he had the back injury and then the knee injury. So he's kind of out of the picture for at least this year. But they drafted Grant Calcaterra, who's a good pass catcher, not really a great blocker, or at least has not been able to show that yet. But Jack Stoll is a guy that made the team last year as a rookie free agent from Nebraska, came back, good shape, ready to at least compete to be the number 2. I don't think he has a whole lot of competition other than Richard Rodgers, maybe, or J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. But what you like about Jack Stoll, Mike, is that he can block, he can catch. He's more like that old H-back, right, that used to play where he can be an athlete and do a lot of different things. But he has a really good opportunity here to come and seize that number 2 spot. And with the slot receiver role sort of up in the air, if they wanted to play more 12 personnel, get somebody on the line who can block and put Dallas Goedert in the slot for the free releases, then they would have the ability to do that because of Jack Stoll's development.
All right. Other question, as we kind of hinted at, but as we talked about that offensive line, is the right guard battle. But how do you expect that battle to kind of shape up? Who are the participants, the particulars? How many people are involved? Is it a 2-man race, a 3-man race, a 4-man race? What happens at right guard, and who are some of the people?
Well, first of all, everybody's got to be healthy. We saw Isaac Seumalo out there. Jack Driscoll ended the year on injured reserve, so he has to come back for training camp healthy and ready to compete. Assuming those 2 guys are healthy and ready to compete, that's your competition. One of those 2 would have to really either get hurt or not play well, or something would have to happen to me to get a third, like a Cam Jurgens in there, who's probably going to focus more of his effort and time on learning backup center than he is at starting right guard. So this is a battle of finesse versus brawn, because Isaac Seumalo, who is a good athlete, he's the stronger, more powerful lineman, whereas Jack Driscoll is the more athletic, nimble, fleet of foot lineman. And it's also kind of a battle of, the teacher's pet in Jack Driscoll versus old reliable when he's on the field in Isaac Seumalo. So it's hard to handicap this one. I think Seumalo is I know Seumalo is the better player, but what happens if you go through camp and it's even? Then all of a sudden you might see a team that wants to go ahead forward with Jack Driscoll because it's even, or they think that Driscoll may have the upside, and then they'd have to see what they're going to do with Seumalo, who makes way too much money to be a backup.
Yeah, and then, you've got guys like Jurgens and Suopeta that I guess are hanging in the weeds as well.
Yeah, Opeta's going to have to fight to make the team because you still have LaRaven Clark, you still have Andre Dillard. So, how many even if you kept 10, think of your starting 5. All right, let's say Seumalo wins right guard. So Driscoll's a backup, Dillard's a backup, LaRaven Clark's a backup, Cam Jurgens is a backup. Then you have 1 spot left for Jack Anderson. Don't forget Jack Anderson. They liked him. They claimed off waivers from the Bills. So you'd have Jack Anderson versus Sua Opeta versus Coyote Awoshika. You've got four guys there who will probably compete for that job. So only one's probably going to make it, and that's if they keep 10, which they don't always do.
I know another thing as we think about training camp is, the amount of bodies they have on the defensive line. Where on day one of training camp, what will we end up seeing there?
I can't wait to see. I think it's going to be fascinating to see if they, first down, offense comes out. Is the defense in a 5-2 look? I mean, do they have your normal 4-down lineman and then Hassan Reddick as the fifth? Or is Jordan Davis already out there? Is he ready? And are they playing more of a 3-4 look? Are they playing a 3-4? Does that mean Josh Sweat on the other side of Hassan Reddick is a stand-up linebacker? Which I think is okay if he's rushing the passer or setting the edge, but not dropping into coverage. Neither of them should be dropping into coverage. It'll be fascinating to see the style of defense they're going to play on the back end, knowing that their kind of rush linebackers aren't guys who can also drop into coverage. So there'll be multiple. I know that. I'm just curious to find out what variation of themselves are going to be on specific down and distances.
Yeah, and, you wonder, for instance, like Fletcher Cox, how much left in the tank does he have to play at a high level? Is he an every down player again? Does he just have a specific package and a specific role? Because one of the problems with him last year was the conversation of, well, they pay me to do this. Well, John Gannon's defense doesn't ask you to do that. So is he going to get his time cut into because he's not really the prototypical guy for that spot?
Yeah, and what about Brandon Graham? Same thing. I mean, if they come out in their 5-2 look and it's, Jordan Davis and Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave, that's 3, and then Josh Sweat is 4, and Hassan Reddick is your number 5 on the line as a Sam, then I guess Brandon Graham's coming off the bench, which is going to be a new role for him. And then, of course, you still have Milton Williams, and you've got Derek Barnett. I mean, I just named 7 guys before I got to Derek Barnett. And Derek Barnett's been a starter for this team for the last 2 years. Yeah. So it's great to have depth in numbers, but you definitely have to figure out roles for these guys before they start to look at you and say, what'd you bring me here for,
Yeah, funny. Somebody posted on the NFL on Fox on Twitter, posted a penalty flag and said, what's the first thing you think of when you see this? And someone wrote Derek Barnett. I thought that was pretty funny.
That's awesome. That's great.
Geoff Mosher, one question I thought we got into this conversation a little bit with Adam on Friday is you've got Bradbury and you've got Slay and you got Maddox, but what's the biggest concern at corner?
If one of those two gets hurt, or perhaps if both get hurt. I mean, these are not spring chickens. We saw a couple of years ago, Darius Slay had a battle injuries, not last year, thankfully, but a couple of years ago he did. I mean, if Slay or Bradbury walks off the field, who's your outside corner? You got Zach McPherson, who they drafted in the 4th round last year. Doesn't have a whole lot of experience there yet. Then you've got that laundry list of guys that they were just kind of like throwing darts at between Tay Gowan, who they got in the Zach Ertz trade, and Carrie Vincent, and like Mac McCain or something like that from the Broncos. Look, I mean, I get that a lot of teams would love to have a number 3 corner that's reliable, and they don't. I understand that number 3 outside corner that's reliable. But there are some veterans out there who you'd probably feel more comfortable if the Eagles give a 1-year deal to come in and handle that. Now, of course, they did bring in Jimmy Moreland, but, he's kind of the slot guy more than an outside guy, and he has to make the team too.
All right, football for Geoff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. Their new podcast dropped this morning at 6 a.m. You can download that and take a listen to what those guys are getting into as well. You go a little bit deeper onto some of the conversations we had, a little bit of their notebook emptying with Adam Kaplan and Geoff Mosher right here on Football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Moshe, thanks, bud.
All right, talk to you Wednesday.
Always good to see him, and we'll have more Football at 4 on Wednesday with Moshe. Tomorrow, Adam's here, and then on Thursday, our division previews continue with Andrew DeCecco as we will take a look at the AFC South this week.